You are wearing something right now, you probably didn't think twice about it. You put it on this morning the same way you brushed your teeth, automatic, routine, unremarkable. But here's the thing. Every other creature on this planet is completely naked and not one of them cares, so why do you? The obvious answer is warmth, or modesty, or fashion. But the real answer is far stranger than any of those things. And it reaches back to a moment in human history so remote, so unfamiliar, that the creature who made that first choice would barely recognize you as the same species. To understand why humans started wearing clothes, you have to first understand what humans were before they wore them. And before that, you have to understand what the sun did to them. Around 2 million years ago, your ancestors left the trees. They stood upright on the open African savanna, and suddenly the sun had access to the entire top surface of their bodies in a way it never had before. This was a problem. The brain, more than any other organ, is exquisitely sensitive to heat. A core body temperature just a few degrees above normal triggers confusion, seizures, and death. Your ancestor was essentially walking around with the most important organ in its body balanced directly under a heat lamp. The solution the body found was radical. Over hundreds of thousands of years, early Homo began losing their fur. Almost every other mammal on the planet is covered in it. You are not. You have roughly the same number of hair follicles as a chimpanzee, they just produce fine, nearly invisible hairs instead of a thick coat. That transformation happened so that your skin could sweat. Naked, sweating skin is one of the most efficient cooling systems in the animal kingdom. Anthropologist Nina Jablonski, who has spent decades studying the evolution of human skin, argues that losing body hair was not a loss at all. It was the upgrade that made humans dangerous. But naked skin creates a new problem. When the sun goes down, the heat leaves fast. On the open savanna, night temperatures can drop 30–40 degrees in a matter of hours. A hairless primate evolved for sweating in the sun suddenly becomes extremely vulnerable the moment darkness falls. So now you have a creature that needs to be naked to survive the heat of the day but desperately needs insulation when the temperature drops. And for a very long time, that creature solved the problem the way every other animal did. It huddled, it sought shelter. It pressed bodies together for warmth. Fire helped eventually, but fire ties you to one place. Fire cannot travel with you. Clothes can. The question researchers have wrestled with for decades is exactly when this happened. When did your ancestor first pick up an animal's skin and wrap it around themselves not just out of instinct, but out of deliberate planned intention? The oldest direct evidence of clothing tools, bone needles fine enough to sew, dates to roughly 50,000 years ago, found in sites across Siberia and Eastern Europe. But the behavior almost certainly began long before the tools became refined. Here is where the science gets strange and wonderful. In 2011, a team of researchers led by David Reed at the University of Florida decided to approach this question from a completely unexpected angle. They studied lice, specifically the genetic divergence between head lice and body lice. Head lice live in hair, body lice live in clothing. They are the same species, but they split apart at the moment humans started wearing enough clothes consistently enough to create a new ecological habitat fabric held against the body. By mapping the genetic clock of that split, Reed's team estimated that body lice first diverged from head lice somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. That is the earliest biological fingerprint of clothing in the human record. Not a needle, not a hide, a parasite. Your ancestors were wearing clothes long before they were sophisticated enough to leave tools behind. Long before they were painting caves. Long before they were burying their dead with ceremony or carving figures from mammoth ivory. The first garment may have been nothing more than a raw animal skin draped over the shoulders. No stitching. No shaping. No intention beyond one cold night that became a habit that became a technology that eventually became everything you see in a department store. But warmth is still not the whole story. If warmth were the only reason, you would expect clothing to appear first in cold regions and then spread. That is not quite what the evidence shows. There are climates where the temperature never demands it, and yet every human culture on Earth without exception wears something, every single one. Anthropologists have never documented a human society that was entirely without body covering or adornment of some kind. Even in the warmest, most equatorial climates, humans wear something: beads, paint, wraps, coverings. This suggests that clothing, almost from the very beginning, was doing something beyond keeping the body warm. Psychologist Paul Rozin has spent years studying the concept of disgust and its relationship to the human body. What his research points toward is something that seems obvious once you hear it, but that almost no one articulates. Clothing transforms the body from a biological object into a social one. A bare body is an animal body. A dressed body is a person. The moment your ancestor draped that first skin over their shoulders, they were not just protecting themselves from the cold. They were, in some wordless prelinguistic way, announcing something about status, about group membership. about the boundary between the self and the world. Think about what that means. Before language, before writing, before cities or laws or money or religion in any organized form, before all of that, humans were already using what they put on their bodies to say something about who they were. The first item of clothing may also be, in some sense, the first social signal, the first symbol, the first act of identity that was separate from biology. Archaeologist Ian Gilligan, in his research on the prehistory of clothing, makes a distinction that very few people ever stop to consider. He separates what he calls thermal clothing from what he calls non-thermal clothing. Thermal clothing is functional, it keeps you alive. Non-thermal clothing is social. It communicates, and what his analysis of the archaeological record suggests is that these two functions emerged almost simultaneously, not one after the other, but tangled together from nearly the beginning. The moment humans started wearing things, they started wearing things that meant something. Consider the shells. Long before any needle existed, long before any evidence of sewn fabric, there is a different kind of archaeological trail. Pierced shells, ochre-stained beads, small objects with holes drilled through them, objects that could only have been worn, strung together, hung from the body. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, pierced shells dated to 75,000 years ago were found arranged in ways consistent with stringing. At Nasiriyah shell sites in Morocco, beads with signs of uswear dated to 130,000 years ago. These were not tools. They did not cut or dig or build. They were worn. And if they were worn, someone was looking at the person wearing them and understanding something. That moment, that first look, that first recognition, is the moment clothing became culture. Here is the counterintuitive part. The thing most people assume about clothing is that it hides the body, covers it, makes it less visible. But in evolutionary terms, the opposite may be closer to the truth. Clothing draws attention to the body in precise, intentional ways. It says, look here, not there. It amplifies certain features and minimizes others. It broadcasts health, age, reproductive status, social rank, and group affiliation in ways that naked skin alone cannot. In the animal kingdom, peacocks grow feathers, deer grow antlers, humans make clothes. The underlying logic is the same: signal, display, communicate. Evolutionary psychologist Jeffrey Miller has argued that much of human creativity, art, music, language, humor, evolved as a form of display the same way a bird of paradise grows an elaborate tail. Clothing fits neatly inside that framework. It was never just warmth. It was never just protection. From nearly the moment it appeared, it was a performance. So the next time you open your closet, you are participating in something far older than you realize. You are not just choosing what to wear against the weather. You are continuing a practice that began before writing, before agriculture, before any civilization that left a single stone unturned. A practice that started on a cold savanna night somewhere in Africa, when a hairless, sweating, brilliant animal did something no other animal had done before. It wrapped itself in another creature's skin, and felt, for the first time, just a little less like an animal. And just a little more like a person. That choice, the one you made this morning without thinking, is the oldest human choice there is.